Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Sure you are.
Oh, yeah.
How you doing, everybody? And welcome to the Moffett on the Mic show. This is a special Monday night episode, more of a venting session on the A1 Sports Network. I'm Craig. He's Klim. You can follow the show on Instagram at Moffett on the Mic and on my Facebook page. Follow Klim and the A1 Sports Network on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can subscribe to the show courtesy of Apple Podcasts. Like and subscribe and leave us a 5-star review because it makes us feel so special at the end of the day. If you want to catch some past interviews we've done, last week we had the great Jamie D'Amico on to talk some Buffalo Bills football post-NFL draft. And just recently with the Creative Pro show happening this Saturday night in Melville, we recently did an interview with the one and only Bryce Donovan, who was going up for the Creative Pro Heavyweight Championship on Saturday night against Eric James. So definitely check out those interviews as well. But we came on really quickly because it was kind of a slow sports day. Mets and Yankees were doing really well, of course. But outside of that, wasn't really much to talk about. And then news broke early this morning, that the Islanders had officially fired Barry Trotz. And that's when I called Klim and I said, we just got to do a quick segment on this. So this is the only topic we're going to be talking about today. If you want to comment on the firing, please comment below, and we'll definitely post it. But this is what we're talking about right now for the next 45 minutes or so will be about Barry Trotz. So the outrage is understandable. The outrage is, I don't necessarily disagree with the Islander fan outrage. If I could piggyback or quote off of a line from Chris Rock, I'm not saying he should have fired him, but I understand. Okay? Here's the bottom line. I know that the Islanders went through a lot of stuff this year. I know this was kind of more of a somewhat unorthodox season for the New York Islanders in general. It came in with a lot of high expectations after 2 straight visits to the Eastern Conference Finals, losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning last year in Game 7, 1-0. Sky was the limit for the Islanders in the offseason. They were going to have Anders Lee back 100%, and they were moving into a brand new arena. Then the season started, and then just kind of weird stuff kept happening. People started blaming it on the 13-game road trip to start the season because UBS Arena wasn't finished. But the Islanders didn't do bad on that road trip, so I can't really kill them too much. I think they finished it over 500, either over 500 or literally at 500. Then came the COVID outbreak right before Thanksgiving, where they pretty much lost half the roster, which definitely, that really did suck for them because it put them. The NHL should have probably shut down the season. They elected not to. The Islanders had to play through it with guys like Austin Czarnik and Grant Hutton and a lot of guys I really hadn't heard much about that were in Bridgeport. But the season played on. Here's what I'm going to say about it. I would have personally given Barry Trotz another year. With everything that happened this year, you need to ultimately figure out if this was just a complete coincidence that it was bad. Maybe it was too coincidental. Maybe it was just with all these things that happened that got in the way all year round. You may need to see if it's another year where they have to figure out if this is the roster that's going to get them a Stanley Cup. When they get everybody healthy, when they get everybody, no COVID, full schedule, meaning no 13-game road trip to start the season. You take those factors into consideration. But the thing that I'm not 100% sold on with Barry Trotz is, and you remember, Klim, we had Andrew Gross on the show about a month or two ago. And I posed this question to Andrew Gross. And what did I say? I said, is there any type of feeling that Barry's seat may get warm because of this season?
Right.
And I said that. And I asked him point blank because something just did not feel right about this season. Something off. It wasn't normal. And the thing was, this was the same roster from last year with the exception of more playing time for Oliver Wahlstrom, more playing time, and the additions of Zach Parise and Zdeno Chara. Those are basically the big additions. Everybody else was brought back. Cizikas brought back, Palmieri, Bailey. The list goes on and on. Andrew said point blank that he didn't think that was the case, that Barry really liked it on the island, and that was that. He said he hasn't really heard any rumblings that there's any tension. There hasn't been any rumblings that he's unhappy. There hasn't been any rumblings that Lou was unhappy. But something always felt off about this season. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then I started to ask myself, did the Islanders hit their peak with Barry Trotz over the last 2 years? Because I'm sorry to say this team was bad. They were bad. There's no other way you can describe it. A lot of guys regressed, and the proof shows in the stats. Beauvillier had a terrible season. Pajot had a terrible season. Palmieri had a terrible season. And Barzal had a terrible season. And this is a team that predicates itself on consistent scoring from all three lines. If you're going to get it from Brock Nelson or Anders Lee, you should be getting it from guys like Beauvillier. You should be getting it from guys like Palmieri. You should be getting it from guys like Barzal. Factor in also that the fourth line was complete garbage this year. Deacon's, Clutterbuck, and Martin were old. They were slow. They were supposed to be the tone-setting line. They didn't set any tones for this season. They were bad. They were not good. When you factor in all those things, the regression from the players, the defense not playing well, Lou not really tweaking the roster the way he should have, Sorokin even not having his best season. I thought there were some times where he was a little shaky. He wasn't like lights out all season long.
Right.
Trotz's dependence on the veterans, guys like Andy Green, guys like Zach Parise, guys like Zdeno Chara. The fact that every time Oliver Wahlstrom made a mistake, he was automatically in Trotz's doghouse. We don't really know how much he really believed in Kiefer Bellows, because we've been waiting for Kiefer Bellows to, make some noise, and he still hasn't really done much of anything. From that perspective, I can totally understand why they let Barry Trotz go. Now, I don't know. Listen, at the end of the day, I don't know if there's a better voice for the Islanders than Barry Trotz. Let's call it what it is. Barry Trotz is the second best coach in this franchise's history next to Al Arbour. I think we can both agree on that. Now, for all the people that are sitting there talking about, well, they got to fire Lou, just remember who built this roster that got them to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years in a row. Okay? That was Lamoriello. Yes, did he inherit guys? Of course he did. He inherited Barzal. He inherited Beauvillier. But at the same time, he also put this roster together for the last 2 seasons that got them to the playoffs. So at the end of the day, I understand, Islander fans are pissed off, and I understand it. But that being said, I'm not saying I don't have a problem with them firing Barry Trotz, but I get why they did it, because quite frankly, Clem, I think they hit their peak under Trotz.
See, I just think that I get what you're saying, and I do agree with you to a point, but I don't think they did hit their peak. I mean, you and I both said it for the past 2-3 years almost, that, all right, after they made the first Eastern Conference Finals, it was like, okay, who are they going to bring in? They didn't bring in anyone. They made a trade for Zach Parise during that season. Cool. What do? They go back to the Eastern Conference Finals. And what do we do again? What was the big question me and you said? Who are they going to bring in? They got to bring in a superstar. They did. They failed 2 years in a row. And I think it reflected on this year. You brought back the same exact team from the past 3 years. Granted, yeah, JG Pajot was a great addition. I'm not knocking Lamoriello for that, but he failed to do what all the Islanders fans wanted, and that was replace John Tavares. He never replaced John Tavares with that superstar elite player. I think me and you were the only ones who saw that Matt Barzal was not going to be that superstar player, and they never got an elite scorer since that point on. And I think that's what it was, because you saw Barry Trotz control this team. You saw them take this team to the Eastern Conference Finals, 1 game away from the Stanley Cup, on the back of Barry Trotz. There's no superstars on this team. You got Matt Barzal, he's great. Sorokin, he's an up and coming. I think he's going to be an elite goalie at some point in his career. But other than those 2 guys, you really don't have much. You have a bunch of average to below average kind of hockey players. And I think that was on the back of Trotz is why they got to those conference finals. I don't think it was really Lou at all.
Okay, but here's what I'm going to counter that with. You brought back the same exact roster from last year, because I remember when the Islanders got eliminated last year in Game 7, they lost to the Lightning. All the Islander pages on Instagram and Facebook were like, oh, if we had Anders Lee, then this wouldn't be a problem. And we get Anders Lee back, we're going to go all the way.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, you got Anders Lee back, and Anders Lee had a good season this year. I'm not saying he didn't. It took him a while to get going, but he did have a good season. But the regression from guys like Barzal, like Beauvillier especially, he frustrates the shit out of me, Beauvillier, because he gets hot for a streak and then he goes away. Pajot did not have a good season this year. Palmieri didn't really have a good season this year. Okay? It is the same roster with the same system. It is, in my opinion, inexcusable for this team with the same exact roster to have those four guys underachieving. The problem I have with the Islander fan base, as well, maybe not necessarily with the Islander beat writers, but the fan base in general, is you are automatically giving Trotz a pass. What do I always say about the Islander fan base, Clem? They get emotionally attached to players and coaches constantly. Barzal gets an automatic pass because it's Matt Barzal, and he doesn't have anybody to play alongside him. You know what it reminds me of? It's eerily similar to all the Jet fans who sat there and said that Sam Darnold just needed weapons upon weapons and he was going to be an amazing player. Okay? It's not like you put Matt Barzal on a team with pure garbage.
Right.
Mark Nelson is a 40-goal scorer. Anders Lee, I think, put up 30 this year. I think 30.
28.
28, close enough. And you have a bunch of double-digit scorers in Parise, in Palmieri. Yes, even Barzal, Pajot, and Beauvillier. You can't sit there and say that he doesn't have the talent. You can't sit there and say he doesn't have the talent around him for Barzal to be good. When is Matt Barzal going to be good? And what I mean by good is I want to see more than 20 goals. Right. 15 goals is not good enough. Jake this morning on his YouTube show was like trying to defend Matt Barzal about, him scoring goals is not the problem. Yeah, it is. Because this is the guy that they looked at to replace John Tavares. And I'm sorry, Islander fans, he has not lived up to the hype. I was expecting 30 goals right now for Barzal. And maybe that's not his game. Maybe he's a table setter. Maybe he's more of an assist guy. Remember I used to always say if I had to, he reminds me of like Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd was very big on assists, but he didn't score like a ton of points every season. Or a ton of points.
No, I mean, Barzal had, what was the stat line this year? I just have it up.
He had 15 goals. I think he had like 30-something assists this year.
Yeah, 15 goals, 44 assists.
So he's more of an assist guy. Okay? But I'm sorry, but I'm going to throw some shade on Trotz on this one. And I don't know. Part of me thinks that maybe this all going downhill. Maybe teams figured out how to beat Trotz's system. I mean, Klim, with all due respect, this team struggled the whole season.
No, you're absolutely right. And like you said, like this was the exact same team that we brought back last year. So maybe there should have been some fight in this team to be like, okay, maybe at least playoff contention, Granted, yeah, you brought in Zach Parise and Zdeno Chara, two guys who are well out of their prime. But again,
but the thing about Chara that I don't like that the fans do is he's the fall guy for everything.
Right.
And that's bullshit. Okay? He's not the reason why Beauvillier can't score. He's not the reason why they got shut out 3-0 to the Kraken at home, or they lost in overtime to the Canadiens, which those are two of the worst teams in the league. These are just examples. But my point is that they protect Trotz because they don't want to see him go. And you can't do that. Like, he has to take some shade.
Right.
He's got to take some shit for this season being a mess. I'm not saying it's entirely his fault, but what my point is you're giving him a pass. You can't give him a pass on the season. And here's another thing that I just remembered. In 2019 to 20, when they made the first trip to the Eastern Conference Finals,
Mm-hmm.
do you remember how that season ended?
Yeah, we sucked.
Remember how we almost collapsed?
Yeah.
And we had to be bailed out by a pandemic to I'm not saying that, oh, I'm justifying Trotz getting fired. I'm just trying to state facts.
Right.
And we had Andrew Gross on again that time. And what was the question I said to Andrew Gross? Was the pandemic a blessing in disguise for the Islanders?
Right.
And it was, because they came back a completely different team. They were mentally away from the game for a while. They had plenty of time to rest and recover and get healthy. And when they got back on the ice, they were a completely different team. If that season is played without a pandemic, I don't know if the Islanders are going to the playoffs.
No, it certainly didn't look like it. It certainly looked like the Islanders were they started off hot that year, remember? And then again, pandemic hit, and it was like, oh shit, they are one of the worst teams. Not one of the worst teams, but they declined epically. And like you asked, did the pandemic bail out the Islanders? Absolutely, it did. Absolutely, it did. And you named all the reasons why it helped them out, and they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, 2 games away from the Stanley Cup.
So when you look at the broad picture of everything, again, I would have probably given Trotz another year.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was deserving of another year. But you understand now where I'm coming from, why I say that I understand why they got rid of him. And here's another thing. I definitely think the players had something to do with it.
You think?
I think the younger guys had some issues with Trotz. I am convinced of that. I don't believe this is just made without consulting anybody. I don't believe Lou Lamoriello can just says, okay, I'm just going to fire Barry Trotz because I can. Right. I just don't see it. I don't see it. And I could easily see the players being somewhat frustrated with Trotz's system, with the fact that, they're not getting goals. They're not scoring. It's a heavy defensive system more than anything. But I'd be very surprised if the players had nothing to do with it. If guys like Matt Barzal weren't happy with what was going on. There was already rumblings towards the end of the season he was unhappy.
Right.
Okay? So there was that. There was a fact of, again, the inability to score. Maybe these guys were just frustrated with the situation, with the system. Maybe they just didn't feel like, and again, every time Oliver Wahlstrom did something bad, he was automatically in Trotz's doghouse. Mm-hmm. So all those Islander fans would sit there and say, well, Trotz had to play the guys that Lou paid for. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. Trotz is not going to just say, okay, I got to play Zdeno Chara because Lou Lamoriello paid him to be here.
No.
First of all, he didn't pay him a lot of money to be here. He could have cut Zdeno Chara at any time. My point is that something always told me that Trotz was not as safe as we were led to believe.
And I think it also, what doesn't help Trotz is, situation when you have young guys like Oliver Wahlstrom, who everyone expected to take a huge step forward this year. Guys like Kiefer Bellows, even Sebastian Aho, there's Anthony Bolivier, prime example. All these young guys, all fans and people, they look for them to take that next step forward. Everyone thought, if we have Oliver Wahlstrom in the playoffs last year, we're going to the Stanley Cup. All right, cool. That was cool to think of at the time. But now he came in this year. He played more than I would say 90% of the games. And he didn't have a great year. He kind of stunk. He wasn't good. And neither was Kiefer Bellows, neither was Sebastian Aho, and neither was Anthony Bolivier. They all didn't have a good year. And that kind of reflects on Barry Trotz and the coaching staff to an extent, because if you're such this great coach, like you said, we saw Barry Trotz as a great coach, but what we didn't see was him develop these young guys. Even Matt Barzal, to a certain extent, yeah, he's a great point guard. Referencing the basketball, he's a great point guard. He'll dish out the ball anytime. He had 44 assists. That's a great year for him. But when you have the younger guys like the Kiefer Bellows, the Anthony Boliviers, the Oliver Wahlstroms, who you expected to be your primary scorers, and they don't turn into anything, that's kind of on the coaching staff and Barry Trotz.
And that's what I mean. So again, I'm not blaming everything on Trotz. I think that Lou should have. You and I ripped Lou to shreds for bringing back the same roster.
Yeah.
Not really trying to shake up the roster, not trying to make a trade to get Vladimir Tarasenko. I know he tried to get Landeskog, but Landeskog decided to stay in Colorado. I know he tried to get Panarin, but Panarin elected to go to the Rangers. So it wasn't like Lou. It wasn't for a lack of trying with Lamoriello trying to bring in another proven scorer for this team.
Right.
But the alarming regression of the team, and the thing was, the team labored the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
They had trouble beating. They had the worst time beating good teams. They couldn't beat the Capitals. They couldn't beat the Penguins. They couldn't beat the Rangers.
Yeah.
I mean, towards the end of the season, they were able to beat the Rangers, but they couldn't beat the Hurricanes. They couldn't beat the Panthers, the Lightning. These are teams you're going to face in the postseason. And you were getting waxed by these teams all season. That just can't happen. The game against Nashville where they lost with 5 seconds left.
Oh.
That game?
Yep.
The complete no-show they had against the Kraken at home after that game got postponed due to the storm. They got shut out 3-0. It was right before the Olympic break, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The game I went to against the Canadiens where they were chasing the Canadiens around the ice the entire game. Canadiens were skating circles around them. A lot of that falls on Trotz. And everybody pivots to the same tired excuses. Well, Lou gave him the oldest roster in the league. The Islanders are the oldest roster in the league, that's true. But the average age of the team is 29 years old. That's not exactly nursing home.
Right.
Okay, Chara's 45. Parisi's in his 30s. I mean, give me a break. 29 years old, that's the oldest roster in the league, and that's what you're complaining about right now? And the thing was, I know they had to get rid of Devon Toews, and I know they had to get rid of Nick Leddy, but they had to get rid of these guys for cap issues. This team was buried in the cap. They basically traded Andrew Ladd and got nothing back in return because they just had to get his salary off the books. These are the types of salary cap headaches that Lou had to deal with. But it's like, again, Trotz, if I had to compare Trotz to a coach in sports, you know who I relate him to?
Oh.
Andy Reid.
Okay.
Andy Reid. He's a winner, but he barely makes it to the Super Bowl. And I know he's got one Stanley Cup win for, just like Andy Reid. How many times did Andy Reid fail to get to the Super Bowl all those years? With Green Bay, with Philadelphia, or win a Super Bowl, let alone get to one. And he finally won one with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But, again, at the end of the day, maybe they need a new voice. And everybody, who everybody pivoted to right away? Tortorella. That's the last guy you want to bring in right now. You don't want to fucking bring in Tortorella for this team.
No.
Everybody automatically is going to be John Tortorella. He's not coming to New York. He's not coming to the Islanders. Like, honestly, in my opinion right now, this is Lane Lambert's job to lose. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. They haven't fired any of Trotz's coaching staff. They've kept them all right now on the roster. It sounds like it's going to be Lane Lambert's job to lose, if he wants it.
No, I agree. I mean, look, it's still early to talk about potential head coaching candidates. Who knows? But again, like, I think I agree with you that Trotz maybe should have deserved one more year because I think it was like you said, like it was equally Trotz as much as it was Lou Lamoriello. Like we said, like Lou really didn't. I mean, yeah, I get the cap situation was all types of fucked up. Like I get that, and
not to mention he had to re-sign Sorokin. He had to re-sign Barzal. These were guys. Listen, every guy that Islander fans wanted him to get, he basically got.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He signed him back.
He tried to get Panarin, but Panarin didn't want to come to the Islanders. He wanted to go to the Rangers. He tried to get Landeskog. I don't know if he really tried for Tarasenko. Tarasenko would have waived his no trade to come here.
Yeah.
Islander fans wanted Matt Barzal re-signed. Lou re-signed Matt Barzal. Islander fans wanted Kyle. I don't know if they really want to Kyle Palmieri back. That's a bad example. But they wanted Casey Cizikas back. They signed Casey Cizikas. They wanted Ilya Sorokin signed for a couple of years. They got Ilya Sorokin signed. And when all those deals went down, all I heard from this fan base was, "Oh, Lou's the best. He's the greatest general manager and ever." Now all of a sudden he's a shit general manager. You can't have these temper tantrums every time you don't agree with something. Yeah. And like I said, Islander fans get way too emotionally attached to players and to coaches that they really like because they don't want to lose them. So they look for any reason not to blame them for all the problems with the team.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And like you said, like Islanders wanted these guys back, Barzal and Sorokin, and I get that. Like I'm 100%. I'm happy. I'm not gonna say like signing back Sorokin and Barzal was the wrong choice. But again, like you brought in guys like, I mean, one was Leo Komarov, who ended up not working out for this team. JG Pageau doesn't look like he's fitting in too well anymore with this team, you know. And you brought in veterans like Kyle Palmieri, Zach Parise, and Zdeno Chara, who are all well past their prime. It's like maybe they could have used that money somewhere else. But again, I agree with you that they did try. He did try. It's not his fault.
To defend Parise and to defend Zdeno Chara, were you expecting them to be vintage Zdeno Chara and Zach Parise?
No, and even Andrew Gross said that when we talked to him about it. Like he was like, "You brought in they're old guys. What did you expect? You know, they're not going to be the guys they were 10 years ago." And I get that.
The expectations went through the roof for those two guys, and I think that Chara wasn't good. He wasn't as bad as everybody made him out to be. Remember when he almost beat the shit out of the entire Florida Panthers team?
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
Parise got off to a slow start. Then he eventually, he wound up having a decent season to finish out the year. Yeah. But by that time, it was too little too late. How many times are they chanting the Josh Bailey song every time Josh Bailey got on the ice? Then all of a sudden, they're ripping the guy to shreds whenever he makes one mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not saying that Lou gets a pass because I've criticized him plenty on this show. And like I said, I was not a big fan of him bringing back the same exact roster from last season.
Mm-hmm.
But he's dependent on his veterans.
Right.
He likes a veteran roster. That's how Lou builds his roster. I mean, he would have brought back Travis Zajac if he could. Because he went right after Zach Parise as soon as Zach Parise got released from the Wild after they bought him out. Because the Islanders didn't have anything in Bridgeport that was ready. They've done a horrible job developing their first-round players. Michael Dal Cole was a top 5 pick. He was basically a third or fourth line freaking player. Josh Ho-Sang was another guy that everybody had such high expectations for, and the guy had a shitty attitude. He had an absolutely shitty attitude. And it was never his fault. And the truth is I don't know how you fix the roster. I think you have to break up this core a bit, though. You have to get some new blood on this team. I mean, whether that means packaging Beauvillier in a deal. I mean, to be honest, I'd fucking shop Barzal.
I'm shopping everyone. No one's safe on this team.
You have to make changes. You can't come back with the same exact roster next year. And it's just like, again, it's like, right away, it's like as soon as a story like this breaks, like the fans, like the knee-jerk reaction of fans is priceless. It is absolutely priceless. Oh, we're a freaking joke franchise again. Like we just went to the playoffs 2 years in a row. Went to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years in a row. The fact is, this was not a good year. Trotz deserves plenty of blame for that.
Mm-hmm.
The players deserve plenty of blame for that. Lou Lamoriello deserves plenty of blame for that. But they want to give Trotz a pass because they don't want to lose him. They're afraid to lose him. And that's where we're at with, again, with all fan bases. You know what it reminds me of, Clem? Remember the 2 years the Jets went to the AFC Championship game?
Yeah.
And they never felt they had to change anything about their roster the year after. Mark Sanchez never had to develop. And what happened after that? They crashed and burned for 2 years under Rex until they finally dumped them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's trending. 2 straight years in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I get it. You had to go on the road for the first 13 games. And give me a break. Because quite frankly, the Islanders were home for a good portion of it. It wasn't like they were on the road literally for 13 games.
Yeah.
They had huge breaks in between games, and then they were flying to like Carolina or Florida. Okay? It wasn't like they were flying across the country to Calgary or to Los Angeles. Or some of those games were pretty close by. They were even playing the Devils. That's a home away from home game. Then you had the COVID outbreak right before Thanksgiving. Tough break. It's yes, the NHL should have probably shut the season down when that happened. Islanders got kind of screwed by that. But eventually they got everybody back. But they still couldn't make the run. Something was always getting in the way. Something wasn't always right with this team.
Right.
Then it was Trotz criticizing Wallstrom. It was Trotz criticizing Bellows. Remember how many Islander fans went batshit when Kiefer Bellows was a healthy scratch?
Yes.
Whose fault was that? That's not Lou's fault. I don't think Lou's telling Barry Trotz, oh, yeah, you got to bench Kiefer Bellows. He sucks. And Lou's not going to tell you guys that the players had nothing to do, or the players told me to fire him. Of course he's going to protect the players. This team is centered around a certain few guys right now, and that's Barzal, that's Brock Nelson, that's Anders Lee, and that's Ilya Sorokin. As far as I'm concerned, everyone else is tradable.
Agreed.
But Barry Trotz deserves plenty of blame for what happened this season.
Yeah.
Plenty of blame.
No, you're absolutely right. And like I said, like Barry, like I said earlier, like you expected guys like Kiefer Bellows, J.G. Pageau to an extent, Oliver Wahlstrom, all these guys to take big steps forward and be elite, not be elite, but be above average goal scorers. And none of them were. Oliver Wahlstrom, he had, what is it? Let me see. He had, where is he? He had 13 goals this year. Anthony Beauvillier had 12. Kiefer Bellows had 6. Like, that's not good. That's not good from the young guys who you expected to be your future. You expect to be your future. Like, it'd be one thing if they were scoring, 20 points and whatever, 20 goals or whatever, and they, it's like, all right, you're seeing some development here. Wallstrom's been on this roster for 2 years now. Kiefer Bellows has been on this roster for 2 years. Beauvillier's been on it for 4 years. And there's no development here. And that falls back on Trotz. It's not Lou, because we know these are good players. We've seen them be good players. Even Barzal to an extent. We know Barzal can score a goal and has amazing puck handling skills, but they're not really progressing like we hope they are, and that falls back on the coaching staff. As much as I would love to protect Barry Trotz in the situation, Craig, you changed my mind, because I was ready to come in and bash Lou Lamoriello, but you made excellent points. I'm like, you know what?
So I got to reel you guys in, man. I got to reel you Islander fans in. You guys are very quick to cut Lou's balls off, and I'm telling you, there's bigger things that are going on than that. And I'm sorry,
no, you're absolutely right.
I'm not saying that Trotz was a terrible coach for the Islanders. Far from it. He was a very good coach. Okay, but I want you to keep in mind over the last 3 seasons of Barry Trotz, and what did we have? We had a year that was shut down due to the pandemic when the Islanders were on the brink of collapse, losing to a pathetic Ottawa Senators team in Ottawa. They lost by like 3 goals.
Oh, I remember that one.
Okay? And the Islanders caught a break with the pandemic. And I hate to say that because so many people lost their lives during COVID and everything. And, it's still not really gone away. But it allowed the Islander players to take a break from hockey, recharge their batteries, and come back with a clearer head.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, they were a much better hockey team. So in many ways, Trotz caught a break there. Okay? Last year was a totally different year. Last year they were pretty much really good from start to finish. But again, they had the number 1 seed in the East or in the Metro, whatever division it is. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
They were in first place for a long time, and they let it slip away. They wound up being the 4th place team. They went from 1st to 4th last year. Islander fans would have killed for home games at the Coliseum, game 1, game 2. But nobody talks about that, Klim. Nobody talks about that with Barry Trotz. And now you fast forward to this year. You have a year, again, COVID outbreak, I get it. Really not too many injuries. There weren't any major injuries where they lost guys for extended periods of time. And there were plenty of guys that developed COVID on the team. But at the same time, when all that cleared up, this was not the same Islander team. They struggled for most of the season. They were chasing Columbus for 3/4 of a season. They couldn't beat the Capitals until the end of the season when they won the last 2 games against them. They couldn't beat the Penguins. They couldn't beat the Hurricanes or the Panthers, the Lightning. These are the teams that you have to beat if you want to be taken seriously as a playoff contender. But I get it now, Klim. That's my point. I understand why he fired him. I personally would not have fired him this year. I would have given him at least 1 more season.
Definitely. No, he definitely at least earned 1 more season. 3 playoff appearances, 2 conference finals appearances. Definitely earned 1 more year at least. But again, like I said, I was coming into this, doing this, and I was ready to bash Lou, but you really opened my eyes, and I'm like, you know what? The more I've been thinking about it, it's like, yeah, it was. Barry did not really help the situation at all.
Like I said, he was a good coach, very good coach, and I would say
we're not denying that.
The thing I hate the most, though, sometimes about it's true about the Islander players is the Islander players need to develop a tougher exterior. I find that they're very sensitive. If you think about all the coaches we've had in the past, Klim, when we had Doug Waite, they didn't like playing for Doug Waite, and then Doug Waite. Now listen, at the time Barry Trotz is available, you definitely make a run at Barry Trotz, and that was when Lou was first stepping into the job as the general manager. So, but when they played for Doug Waite, they didn't really like playing for Doug Waite. They didn't like playing for Scott Gordon. Okay, remember Scott Gordon?
Yep.
All right. Who was before? Remember when we had Peter Laviolette?
Oh.
And everybody, they didn't like playing for Laviolette. And what happened to Laviolette? He goes and wins Stanley Cups. So, a little bit of onus is on the players too. Because the players have to understand that you're just not going to get who you want to play for all the time. Yeah, I would love to have a job where my boss was an easygoing person who didn't give a rat's ass. Do you watch Seinfeld?
Yes.
Remember Kruger?
Yes.
He's like, whatever. It's like kind of like that. Yeah, of course you'd want a coach like that, or you want a boss like that, but you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. Because that guy's got to win games. But you guys are living in the past. You just keep bringing up these 2 years in the Eastern Conference Finals, but that's great. But now there's a bigger problem. And that is, I think teams have figured them out.
Mm-hmm.
And Trotz is stubborn. He's an older guy. He doesn't want, he doesn't want to fucking play he wants to play who he wants to play. He doesn't want to wait around for Oliver Wahlstrom to figure it out. He doesn't want to wait around for Kiefer Bellows. He wants to go to veterans.
Right.
At the end of the day, listen, as I said before, and I'll say it again, I would have given Barry Trotz another year. But I understand where Lou Lamoriello is coming from. I understand. Like, think about it. Remember last year when the Rangers all of a sudden picked up and they fired John Davidson and Jeff Gordon?
Yep.
And we were freaking the fuck. We were like, holy shit, I can't believe they did that.
Yep.
We were like stunned. We had Colin on and everything, and Colin was talking about it. John Davidson's a pretty good executive for NHL teams. And they just picked up and fired him just like that. Right away, put Chris Drury in the position. And we were like, okay, well, it sounds like it's a panic move that Dolan didn't want to let Chris Drury go.
Honestly, it was the right move. Look at the Rangers now.
How good are the Rangers now?
Yeah.
Back in the playoffs, young roster, Lafreniere, Kakko, they're all developing. You got Panarin.
Chris Kreider.
Yeah, Chris Kreider, 50-goal scorer this year. Then he makes like really awesome moves, I thought, for Barclay Goodrow, Ryan Reeves. He gave him like a really tough. The Rangers have never been that tough, physical. Never had that line with that tough agitator. Never had that in a long time.
Yeah, like that enforcer kind of guy.
So let it all play out before you guys rip Lou to shreds.
Yeah, I want to see what he does now from here.
Listen, Lamoriello's a smart general manager. I think he can only work with what he has, though. Last year, he had to worry about getting Barzal signed, and he had to worry about getting Sorokin signed. And he got him signed. Everybody wanted Casey Cizikas back. He got Casey Cizikas back. Everybody wanted, what's his name? I'm losing it. I can't remember who it was. But he went out and got all those players that you guys asked for. And yeah, I know he had to trade Devon Tays. I know he had to trade Nick Leddy, but he had to do it. It was a salary cap issue.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have traded Devon Tays if it wasn't a salary cap, if it didn't allow him the flexibility. If it didn't matter. He would have kept Devon Tays. But he had no choice. He had to trade him. You can't get on him for that. I don't think it's fair.
Right, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So the Islanders and Barry Trotz have officially parted ways, and Islander fans are just going to need to accept it and move on. Because, again, at the end of the day, I think he was a good coach. I'm not saying he wasn't a good coach. But there are definitely some things that worked against him.
Yeah. And like I said, like I was fully prepared to roast and just tear Lou Lamoriello apart. But I will say, Craig, you brightened my eyes. You made the mind going and got me thinking.
And it was funny because like all day I was like trying to figure out how to like approach this, and then I remembered I was like, holy shit, that season was shut down because of the pandemic.
Yeah,
it all made sense.
Yeah,
in many ways, Trotz got lucky.
Yeah, like you said, Islanders got, I hate to say it, but they got bailed out by the pandemic.
So I personally think the next coach is going to be Lane Lambert. I would be very surprised. I don't know who else it could possibly be. I don't think it's going to be a John Tortorella. Highly doubt it's going to be like a Mike Babcock. But you never know.
So I was going to say the New York Post already wrote an article on potential head coach to replace him.
Was it Larry Brooks?
It is Ethan Sears wrote this article, and he named these are the guys he named: Rick Torchett, analyst on TNT; Scott Stevens.
No.
Brett Thompson, the Bridgeport head coach.
Oh, no. He should have been fired from Bridgeport.
Paul Maurice.
Paul Maurice is a guy I've heard as a rumor also.
Lane Lambert. Pete DeBoer.
He's actually not a bad coach.
He's not. No, I would take him.
I think he won a cup with the Sharks.
Yeah.
And I know he took the Devils, I think, to like the finals one year or something like that.
Devils and Vegas.
He's not a bad coach, man. I would take Pete DeBoer.
Mike Babcock.
No, he was bad in Toronto. That left a bad taste in my mouth. He should have been better.
And Joel Quenneville.
He won a cup with the Blackhawks, I think, right? Joel Quenneville?
Yes, I think so.
And I know he's won a cup. I just don't remember if it was with the Blackhawks or the Avalanche.
It'll be exciting, though. It really will be.
Honestly, if I had to take all those names right now,
mm-hmm.
I would take Pete DeBoer.
I would take DeBoer. Or Babcock. I would take DeBoer or Babcock. One of those two guys.
but I think it's going to be based around the young guys and getting those guys the opportunities. Like I said, the Barzels, the Beauvilliers, I think they're going to do whatever they can to get those guys the opportunities.
Right.
Although I definitely think this roster is going to be shaped a little differently. Lou knows right now he's got to get the youth going, and he's got to get guys like Bellows. The Islanders have a good roster. Their guys are pretty, fairly young, not insanely young, but
Right.
they're not like Alexis Lafreniere and Capo Caco, but
they're still young.
They have guys that are in their 20s. They have plenty of guys in their 20s. You have a couple of you already know Char is not going to be back with the team next year. Parizi's going to be back. Clutterbuck is going to be back. See, but that's where Lou pisses me off. He's automatically bringing back the same guys. I don't have a problem bringing Parisi back, but I do have a problem bringing Clutterbuck back.
Yeah.
I just don't think we need Clutterbuck. I think we can find. There are 10 Cal Clutterbucks in free agency you could find.
No, definitely. Absolutely.
So I personally appreciate everything Barry Trotz did for the Islanders. Like I said, I would have definitely given him another year, but I understand where Lou's coming from on this one. So I don't agree with it, but I'm going to let it play out, and I'm going to see where it goes and see where Lou's going to be looking to for the next head coach.
Yeah.
All right, Clint, before we get out of here, you got anything else?
That is it for me.
All right, on that note, that is going to do it for this very quick episode of the Moffett on the Mic show for this Monday night. I'd like to thank everybody for checking out live on Facebook Live. You can follow the show on Instagram at Moff on the Mic and on my Facebook page as well. Follow Klim and the A1 Sports Network on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Be on the lookout for our next show. It will be sometime in the near future. We're going to try to just center it around guests more. We're going to try to figure out a new format and all that stuff and just see where it goes. But just be on the lookout. We'll try to post announcements. Klim, I hope you're going to be on top of that. And what I want you to do is, I know, like, basically I'm the only show on A1 right now. I want to hear what your top pair pod friends have to say.
Yeah, we can get them on.
All right. So I want to hear exactly what they have to say. And I would love to challenge, and honestly, I would love to challenge Jake Asman about this. Because I was very bothered by Jake Asman today. Jake Asman looked like his dog died on his show on YouTube. That's how he looked, like he was depressed about Trotz.
Oh, I'll get Jake on.
So, all right, on behalf of Klim, this is Craig. Wherever you are, stay safe. Enjoy the remainder of the week. Enjoy all the games. Enjoy everything. And we'll be posting up updates very soon on when our next show will be. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. Klim, wherever you stay safe, all right? No heavy drinking tonight.
I'll try not to.
Okay. I'll take it. All right, take care, everybody. Have a good one.